Hello and welcome everyone to today's Fairygodboss live webinar. We're so excited to have you all join us for our launch party. We are going to give folks just a few more seconds to connect, but while we're waiting, we'd love to know where everyone is tuning in from today. You'll see on the right side of the screen that there's a chat box. So if you feel comfortable doing so, please send a message in the chat by telling us where you're joining from. I'm based in New York City, where I am joining you from our brand new headquarters in Hudson Yards. And I hope I will be seeing some of you here sometime very soon. And for those of you who do not know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Millions of women visit Fairygodboss for career connections, jobs, community advice, hard to find intel about companies, and virtual events like this. So let's see where we have folks tuning in from. Looks like we have Kansas in the house. We have New Jersey, California, and Florida. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jessica Palacios, and I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts for talent acquisition at BlackRock. And I've been with BlackRock just over 6 years, and what keeps me here is the great people I'm surrounded by every day, and you'll be hearing from two of those gems in just a few minutes. A couple housekeeping items before we dive in. First, this session will be recorded and shared via email with all registrants. Secondly, during the discussion, we would love to hear from you. So we hope that you will use the staged chat on the right side of your screen to send messages, comments, and questions to the panelists and to one another. With that, drum roll please, I am now officially excited to be kicking off today's event, The Power of Resilience, Lessons from Successful Women Returners, which is designed to celebrate three things. Number one, we are celebrating the launch of BlackRock's returnship program in the U.S. There will be more information on how to apply at the conclusion of our program. Two, we are celebrating the experience of our two BlackRock colleagues here today, Dawn and Karen, and to help you, all of you, get a sense for our culture here at BlackRock. And of course, we are celebrating you. If you are someone who has just started thinking about returning to the workforce after a long career break, or if you're already well on the path, welcome and congratulations on taking this very important step in your career. Let us know in the chat where you are in your journey. So, ladies, I'm thrilled to introduce Dawn, Director, Relationship Manager at BlackRock, and Karen, Managing Director, Fixed Income iShare Strategy. Both gals are here to give you different perspectives on returning to work. And I think what you will find threads this whole conversation together is the theme of resilience. So with that, would you each please take a few minutes to introduce yourselves? We'd love to hear about what's going on in your lives personally, professionally, and what you do here at BlackRock. Dawn, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Jess. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here with you today and share my personal career journey. Now, as Jessica mentioned, my name is Dawn Gagan, and I am a Senior Relationship Manager within BlackRock's Financial Institutions Group, which is the sales team that focuses on insurance companies within BlackRock. My primary role at the firm is to lead client coverage teams to meet the various needs of our insurance companies' investment teams. But my extracurricular, if you will, is the America's Chair for one of our employee networks called Families and Allies at BlackRock, FAB for short. FAB's focus is to provide resource and support for our employees balancing work and life obligations. Now, from a personal perspective, I am a mom of 3 boys, oldest being almost 17, followed by 13 and a 9-year-old. We live in Jersey City and have a half Beagle, half American Bulldog named Gambit, named after the X-Men character. His full name is actually Gambit Hamilton Skywalker. Now, you know, with a name like that, I have all boys. After my undergrad at Cornell Engineering and B School from NYU Stern, I worked in the corporate world for about 9 years, but then became a stay-at-home mom. And so that's why I wanted to share my story here with you. When I was pregnant with my first child, I decided to become a stay-at-home mom. And then 5 years later, shortly after the birth of my second, I decided to re-enter the workforce through Goldman Sachs' then pilot returnship program. I was later converted to a full-time employee at Goldman and stayed for another 3 years. After which I went on to BlackRock, went to JP Morgan Asset Management for a while, and just last year returned and rejoined BlackRock. So I'm also known as a boomeranger. More on that later, but first I want to give Karen an opportunity to introduce herself. Karen?
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Karen Vera. I lead up iShares fixed income strategy. I am based in San Francisco, and on Wednesday will be my 13th year with BlackRock. I am actually not a, thank you, I'm actually not a returner. I'm here to offer the perspective of a manager. We had hired somebody on my team as part of the returnership program. But I think what you'll find is there's a lot of people who are very supportive of returners. My mom was actually a returner. I am one of 4 children, and she stopped working when she had my sister, and she tried to go back to school. And then she subsequently had 3 more babies, so she kept taking time off of work to finish up her college degree, and she finally finished it up when I was 15 years old. And she went back to the workforce and then had to try to navigate that landscape. And so she had a couple of jobs until she finally ended up becoming a financial advisor. And then when I was in college and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I actually interned at her office when I was a college student. And I think it really helped inform my career as well as give me a perspective on the industry with her rejoining. So I've been at BlackRock for 13 years, and I now lead a team of strategists, and we are the client-facing part of the portfolio management group. So I have a handful of team members here in San Francisco, and I also have 5 different team members in New York. And I really do love this job. I think it gives me a great perspective on the markets because we spend time every day learning about what's going on in the bond markets. And then we also get to help our clients and investors really think through their portfolios and their allocations. I also have 2 children myself and have taken mat leave and come back as part of this role. And so my daughter just turned 10 years old and my son is 4.5. And I've been able to juggle this job. I get them off to school in the morning and then I come into the office. So I think BlackRock has really enabled me to have the career that I want and have a family. And I also co-head WIN West. So WIN is our Women's Initiative Network. We have it kind of broken up by geography, but I co-head our West Coast network. So that includes San Francisco, Seattle, and Newport Beach and Denver. And so we help put on programming to help all of our members navigate their careers. So we do everything from personal finance courses to mentorship programs. So I think that we really try to offer a wide range of resources, and I'm really happy to be part of it. I love that. Love being on the phone with some fellow working moms. Your kids are older than mine, though, so thank you for kind of giving me the hope and the courage that they will get older, and my career, can also continue. Just have yours have flourished. Thank you so much for joining us here today. For those of you just tuning in, I'd like to remind everyone we will be answering questions that come directly from all of you. So please submit your questions in the chat on the right of your screen, and we will do our best throughout the program to address as many as we can. Okay, so Dawn, we're going to get started with you in terms of the discussion. We're here today to discuss your personal career journey, the challenges, the successes, and let's keep it on time though. But the challenges, the successes you faced in returning to work. I'm sure we could talk about it all day. And then Karen, of course, you're joining us to add insight from the manager's perspective. Such important insights from both areas. Dawn, we'll start with you. Let's talk about those challenges and how you overcame them, and then we'll pass to Karen. What were some of the biggest challenges that you observed for the individual that joined your team after returning, and what did you do to support them?
Sure, Jess. So I will come from 2 fronts. One is the personal front and one is the professional front. So on the personal front is, of course, my 2 young children at the time. Up until that point, I was with them practically 24/7, especially as my then husband was an investment banker working crazy hours. I was and always will be a mom first. So when I accepted the Goldman Returnship Program, my first order of business was to arrange for my parents to come and stay and watch my children. Short time, within 2 months, I realized that was not the ideal arrangement because my parents had no control whatsoever over my 4.5 years old. And so I had to try to find other arrangements. I then tried au pair programs, which turned out to be a hit or miss for me. And after the third au pair quit less than 2 months in because she really wanted to use the program as a way to come to America, I had just from a interim solution aspect, put out an ad in a local Chinese newspaper to find somebody while I'm seeking a replacement au pair. Now, within 2 weeks of having this intern person, I knew, because of the fact that she made my life so much easier, that I was going to keep her forever. So I quit the au pair program altogether. I said to her, I said, you just become my full-time nanny. She said yes, and she has been with me for over a decade and is very much a part of my family. So the point of my story is be resilient. Be resilient in finding the right support structure for your family's needs, and don't give up if the first few options don't work out. And then my second part is the professional perspective. So if I think back, I was out of the workforce for 5 years at that point, and going into a niche industry, asset management, that I actually didn't have any experience in. So I was facing a bit of a confidence crisis. Just thinking, what if my skills are too rusty? I knew little about the industry, so how can I succeed as a returner? Now, at this point, I had to figure out what my transferable skills are and how to apply them to my job. So, for example, I was put into the marketing team during the returnship program. And with little knowledge of the industry, I couldn't contribute to the content. So instead of focusing on what I couldn't do, I focused on what I could do. And in this case, I knew how to make processes more efficient from my engineering training, and I knew how to work with Excel models from the previous work I did at American Express. So I applied my skills in building an Excel model that took the raw data from like the investment teams and automatically converted it to the layout required for the final marketing material, thereby reducing the turnaround time for each piece of marketing material from 2 days to an hour, and eliminating the manual error that often occurs when you're transposing numbers. So this was obviously tremendously helpful to the marketing team. I also had to, as I was recalling my tenure there, I also had to pivot when halfway through the program. The marketing manager told me that at the end of the program, they only had a headcount in Salt Lake City and not in New York. Now, I certainly wasn't going to move, with my family and everything. So I spoke to her and worked out an arrangement where they extended my program by 2 months. I can contribute to, continue to contribute positively towards the team while I was there. But this also allowed me a opportunity to network with other business areas and see where I may be a good fit. And I was ultimately hired full-time into the institutional client service team at Goldman. So it, continue to stay positive and have those conversations is important. So Karen, I'll turn it to you for the manager's perspective.
So we've had only one returner join our team, and she also joined in the New York office. And she had taken a pretty long leave of absence, almost 12 years from the industry. And she came at it with a background where she also had some investment banking experience, but had not previously worked in asset management. So for her, it was about just filling in those knowledge gaps and trying to find where she could contribute. And then I think we had the added wrinkle that then COVID happened, and then everybody immediately went remote. So what I could say from the manager's perspective, what did we do to try to make it more successful for her, and then what did she do? I would say give yourself some grace and some patience. There's going to be a learning curve, no matter if you did this exact job previously or if you're coming at it from a completely new industry with a different background. I think what Dawn was able to do in her example of leveraging some previous experience and finding her niche was really important. So I'd say there's going to be a learning curve. How steep it is just will depend on you and your skills. But I'd say that the biggest thing was probably the lack of confidence, feeling like everybody must know more than her. But then quite frankly, after a few months, she, found her footing, got the vocabulary down because there's always crazy acronyms at every firm, and was able to really get back into the flow of working. So I'd say in the first 3 months, no question is a dumb question. Have that psychological safety with your manager and your team, and be open and honest about what you know and what you don't know. And then if you don't know something, leverage your resources. There's going to be a lot of either help internally or other team members or other people across the business who can help fill in some of those gaps. And then I'd say that the last probably advice I could give is really around setting boundaries. Tell your family what you need from them. If you need them to do more, do less. I think Dawn's example of having to try a few different childcare regimes and situations. Even with my children, I find that what works during one school year may not work the next school year. And so we're constantly kind of fine-tune that model even at my house. But I'd say both tell your family what you need from them and and your management team and your teammates what you need from them. If there's an hour of the day where you have to spend time with your kids or you have to spend time on other things and there's nobody else to fill in, let them know that. So I think that's been really important for me in terms of how can I best support anybody returning back to work on my team. Is really no different than any other team member that I have. But I would say just be really clear about what you need to make it successful. Don't just suffer in silence. Don't feel like you have to kill yourself and work 80 hours a week because you're coming at it for the first time in a while. I think that work-life balance is extremely important. So that's what I would just recommend. Over-communicating, knowing that there's going to be a learning curve no matter where you are, and then don't feel shy about reaching out when you don't know something, because no question is a dumb question. I love that advice. Boundaries. I've written it in caps here in my notes. As a working mom myself, I'm working on very many of the same things here. So thank you. Very, very good tips all around. Dawn, let's come back to you. During your extended career break, how did you build a support network, right? And what role did this support network, could be family, could be peers in the industry, what role did they play in your success in returning back to work? And maybe we can also squeeze in any other resources besides your network in terms of our audience and what they can learn in transitioning back to work.
Well, I would say support networks are very, very important. Prior to my career break, I was a project manager working in the executive office of American Express, and I really didn't have time to make friends outside of work, and I didn't actually even know many of my neighbors. So when I had my first child, I was pushing his stroller in the neighboring park, trying to make eye contact with anyone else pushing a stroller. And the minute I made a connection, I quickly walked over and started a conversation. And through this, found other new moms in a similar boat. And I imagine, probably many of our audience members may have had similar experiences. And the new moms, we commiserated on not knowing what the heck we're doing with a newborn, sharing stories over, crying over spilled milk. Like that expression didn't really, resonate until I actually lived it. But we also shared learnings and supported one another, right? So eventually a handful of us started the Jersey City Moms Group, and in order to gather a broader community for resource and support. And so as our kids moved from infancy to toddler to preschoolers, a number of us all had the desire to resume working. And so again, we reached out to one another for support, encouragement, which is super important too, and resource. And from a personal front, for me, having a support community was even more important because my husband at the time was not supportive of my career. He wanted me to very much to be a homemaker, and this led to many conflicts and eventually contributed to the demise of our marriage. But I firmly believe that the network I had built, then became a human safety net at that point for me. So I encourage everyone to leverage the communities like Fairygodboss or other type of support groups in all aspects of your life. And as Karen mentioned before, don't be afraid to reach out, right? To lean on your support networks when you need it. And I also want to just also highlight that networking is a continuous effort. I made a point to stop by to say hi or grab coffee with people to catch up on a regular basis, not just when I need them. Now, this makes everything feel less transactional and more relationship oriented. And I will say that each of my job transitions since Goldman was because of the relationships I built, where someone said, "Hey, Dawn, why don't you come work for my company?"
Wow, Dawn, what a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Karen, how about you? Were there any specific resources that you found helpful to share with your colleague during her transition back to work that we can share with our audience? Absolutely. I'd say one of the best resources that I found is care.com. I think as Dawn highlighted, the au pair program, I've used au pairs in the past as well and have stopped using them. But with BlackRock has some benefits around care.com, and you could even write up your own job description. I personally needed somebody who could pick up my kids just in the afternoons, and they had to be able to drive, and that is kind of sometimes a large ask to find someone. And I had to write up a job description. I leveraged care.com. They're all screened. And then I was able to find somebody who just helped me bridge last school year. And so I was encouraging the returner as well. If she needed these childcare bridges, that's a great resource to schedule someone. And then maybe once you get to know them, then you create your own relationship with that person. So that enabled us to have a lot of flexibility around, these situations. And then I would also say that leverage the community. I think that's really important. I spend a lot of time hanging out on the weekends with coworkers as well, so who have become my friends. And whenever I need something as well, many of these coworkers who have become my friends really step up and help me as well. So I would say that as you're going through this journey, there's a lot of different ways to get help, to get care, to help fill in those gaps as you have your work responsibilities that are going to take over some of the previous family time and some of the duties that you do. And so I even had to tell the returner on my team as well as myself, like, what are things that only I can do? And what are things that I can ask for help and have other people do for me? So I think there's definitely things like that I want to do for my kids every day, but then there's other aspects of the job, like maybe dropping them off to school, where they're just being the chauffeur. That's not something that necessarily that only I can do. So I think that can also help you just prioritize things. And then even asking your family, like, what do they need from you? And what does it mean to be a good mom or a good dad or a good parent to them in that moment? And the answers may surprise you. So I'd say sometimes just asking people what they need from you and then helping set those expectations, I think really does go a long way. Great. Such good tips and resources. If anyone in our audience has any resources that they have found helpful in their journey and they'd like to also share with the audience, please do pop those in the chat as well. Let's all learn from each other and benefit from the mind share that we have here today. As a reminder, we are looking for your questions in the chat, so please don't forget to participate as we go along. And I would love to know from both of you, and maybe Karen will stay with you, what is that role that mentorship plays in the career development for a returner or in general, and how does one go about really finding a mentor and a sponsor to support their growth? It's always a tricky topic that returners are looking to navigate. Yeah, I think mentorship, at BlackRock, we've got a lot of different formal mentorship programs where you might match up someone in a junior role to someone with a more senior role, and finding somebody. What I've always found successful with my mentors is as you rejoin the workforce, there might be people who are going out of their way to offer you that sort of support and help, who might want to learn more about you personally. And then those are always good candidates, I think, to becoming a mentor. And I just sometimes look around at women or people that I admire, and then I come with them, offering something, both, things that I do and I observe in the workforce every day, and then also trying to get their advice on situations when I need them. I think it's also important, what I've learned over the years is there's different kinds of mentors that you might need at different stages in your career. And I think coming back to work, maybe you might want to find somebody who is also a working parent, and therefore, you might want to learn from them and what works from them. Maybe you're somebody who's looking for a promotion in the future, so you might want to find someone who's recently gone through that promotion process. If you're looking for, it just depends on kind of what you're looking for. The other thing that I really learned over the years is there's differences between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor is somebody who could offer you some informal advice, who can maybe help coach you through specific situations, but they're not directly in your reporting line typically. And they're really there to be more like a friendly person to help give you some guidance. Where a sponsor is somebody who is helping drive your career forward. Many times companies will have formalized promotion committees or promotion processes, and the sponsor is someone who is willing to nominate you for that promotion and talk to the committee about your accomplishments and really put a stake
in the ground and say this person is operating at this next level. It's always harder to find. I feel like women always have plenty of mentors. They don't always have the sponsors, and the sponsorship is really what enables you to get promoted. So I would say the returner on our team, she looked around and she had a vice president title, which is a middle range title. At BlackRock, we have analyst, associate, vice president, director, and managing director. And she looked around at most of the people her age were already directors, which makes sense because they had been working, continuously. And so I think she felt a little bit behind in her career. So right away, her questions are around, well, how do I become a director? What are the responsibilities? And so I think that was great that she was able to do that and make her career ambitions known, and she kind of felt like she was coming at it from behind. But I do think, and today she's now a director, so I think it was in some ways it was successful. But I just think that figure out those people in the organization who are willing to mentor you, and then after you've been there for a while, really think about that sponsorship. Who are the people who can help you get to the next level or achieve your career goals, whether it's maybe transferring to a different part of the business, whether it's getting that corporate promotion, or just somebody who's willing to vouch for you on projects and really put your name forward. So I'd say that there's some really good Harvard Business Review articles on mentors versus sponsors. And I think that's really even helped me in my career really think through the kinds of relationships you need to build and who within the organization would be willing to sponsor you for certain things.
Love that. Dawn, any more insights from you to build on that great advice about mentors and sponsors?
Yeah, I absolutely echo everything that Karen said. And, mentorship is tremendously helpful. And what I found is while there's a lot of mentor pairing program within BlackRock and other firms I've been at, that the best mentorship I've experienced grows organically. So coming back to my earlier point about keeping that regular contact, right? Not just when you need something. And, to Karen's point, it's also, oftentimes a two-way street, right? What you can offer up. And you might not think you can offer up anything, but you never know. I remember pairing up. This was an actual pair up, but then as it turns out, we hit it off from a personal life challenge perspective, and I was able to offer a lot of insight and help her through some of the personal aspects while she gave me career advice and what to look out for there. So it was very much a two-way street. But again, growing the mentorship to grow organically and keeping that regular contact. I also think that mentors can be men or women, so don't just limit yourself, right? And actually oftentimes they give very different diverse perspectives, and you want to have that diverse perspective, right? You don't want to just have people come give you advice from only one point of view. So I encourage getting sort of that broad scope of perspectives, and to actively seek out constructive feedback. So where you're to focus your areas of improvement. And as Karen mentioned, the sponsorship is something very different. You got to identify people that actually can influence your career progression. And the last thing I'll say is about paying it forward. So I mentor many junior staffs, and I just want to say that, ladies, when you get to that level, make sure you pay it forward and mentor the next generation of talent.
Such good advice. Thank you so much. And I love the point about checking for organic chemistry with that mentor. If we were all together in a room, gathered, all 200 of us, I would say, if anyone who's been set up on a date, please raise your hand and then leave your hand in the air if you're still with that person, and a lot of hands go down. And that's kind of how some pairing programs work out. Every now and then you get a great match for life, and that's great. But it's important to put in the work and to look for those individuals that you really click with, that you can have that honest and trusting safe space to discuss some of the difficult aspects, and also celebrate some of the successes and have empathy for one another. And so really great point on that front. I am going to check the chat box to see if we can take some from the audience at this point. Here's a good one. This is open to either or both of you. Can you talk a little bit about how you prepare your kids for the transition back to the workplace?
Maybe, Dawn, you probably have so much more to say, but I'll just chime in. I give a lot, even when I had to start traveling again, because I wasn't traveling for work during COVID. So I just have to tell the kids, mommy's going on a business trip. I'm going to be great. You're in good hands with your other caregivers, and then I'm going to check in at this time. And they're super resilient. Like they, understand you're not going to be there for every little thing, but, if you set expectations, like I'm going to be gone these windows, but you'll see me then. I think kids like routine. They like to know what's coming. And I think if you just help set the expectations up front, and give them that reassurance that I'm still your mom, I'm still here to take care of you, they very quickly adapt to the schedule. And Dawn, I don't know what you would say.
Well, I was going to say, because I was a stay-at-home mom for the first 5 years of my oldest's life, I don't think he's ever gotten over it. I will tell you, he either texts or call me at about 10:30 each morning going, where's money? So, he still, thinks he's always the priority. And I find that funny, and then a lot of respect. Some of that is true, but to Karen's point, setting the expectation, and for kids that perhaps don't know any differently, like my second one, because he was so young when I returned to work. It doesn't necessarily register. He knows that both mom and dad, work, work a lot, work long hours. But again, back to what Karen had mentioned before in terms of sort of setting the boundaries and setting the priorities. I define my own priorities, and I work around that framework. So for example, I have my kids 60% of the time, and my ex has them 40% of the time. So for the nights that I have them, I ensure I come back home. We have the family dinner. We are all together. And then for the other nights, given my circumstance, I then can work in the office a little bit longer, and so I choose to do that. So I think making sure you set your priorities and then work within that framework is, for me, the best way to sort of manage expectations all around.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like what I do in my household. So I'm glad to verify here live with the Fairygodboss community that I seem to be doing something on the right track. There's a lot of, managing of expectations and front running and socializing that happens ahead of business trips and late nights in the office. And so thank you both for sharing those tips. Let's see, there are some more questions from the audience. And we have one participant who is wondering how to talk about a career break on a resume and maybe in an interview while we're at it. They're wondering specifically about wording that can be used or said in that context to explain the career break. And, we've been talking a lot about taking a break for caregiver responsibilities, but of course there are lots of reasons why somebody may choose to take an extended career break. So we'd love to hear your perspectives on that. Karen, you're a manager. You've probably, kind of seen individuals with career breaks before. Do you have any thoughts for us on that?
Yeah, I think you can feel free to be honest about it. Like you don't have to put too much information and make it so that way it's distracting from the rest of your education experience. But we've even hired people who just took 6 months off to go traveling. I've seen gaps in your resume, and you just ask people about them. Some people do go to business school. Some people took a year off to go see the world. And so with those people, I think they came into those interviews feeling a little self-conscious about their career break, but I think it was all very explainable. And it's like, well, I did something that was a life goal for me, and now I'm ready to get back to the workforce. And same thing, if you have to take off for child care experiences, we had somebody else who had to take time off to take care of his mother when she was very sick. And I think you just explain it. And I mean, not every manager or every firm may accept that, but there are plenty of people who are willing to accept it and who are going to be supportive. So you almost have to just plant a lot of seeds and just be honest and own your truth and own your story. And I think that's going to come off in the authenticity and genuine nature of yourself. And I think if anything, that's going to create better connections. Once again, you don't have to feel like you have to share too much information, but if you just, listed maybe why there was a gap in a couple of sentences or a sentence, I think it's something that people can quickly understand and then evaluate you based on your experiences.
Yeah, I feel the same way because I do a lot of recruiting on behalf of my team. And I think being transparent and honest is, the best course. And as Karen said, it's very explainable, the various challenges that we all have in our lives, right? So that's probably the best policy.
Yes, I think it's great advice. I think transparency is the best policy from my perspective as well, wearing my HR hat. And I do think there are many constructive ways to talk about career breaks in terms of what you've learned from the experience, coming back to the industry with maybe more resolve or with a different perspective. And there are different ways to kind of frame that, especially anchoring to those transferable skill sets we heard about earlier, to make sure that folks are anchoring to the years of experience, concrete experience that you did have before leaving the workforce, and not necessarily, focusing on the break itself. And so another tip that I would offer is to kind of redirect potentially any questions about the break to redirect to the skills and experience that you had before the break, so that you can bring that conversation in the interview back to the matter at hand, which is, you have an open position, an individual with the following skills are required to fill the position, and I have, experience and transferable skills in that position. And so I would offer that tip as well for anybody who is in that interview process now. One other participant is wondering if that same transparency applies after taking a break for an illness. And what I would share is that from a BlackRock perspective, we are welcoming of individuals with all sorts of medical challenges and conditions, and we have processes for which you can request accommodations if needed. And so, certainly that shouldn't stop you as well from returning back to the workforce. Any other closing thoughts there before we move on to the next question about talking about breaks? Okay, great. Okay, we have another interesting question from the audience here. Any tips on how you handle mom guilt? And I will say, I'll kick us off here. First of all, the mom guilt is real, and there is definitely this endless societal pressure, let's just say, only to be perpetuated by the people with perfect lives on social media that, we're only seeing the highlight reels. And so my recommendation on the mom guilt is, first of all, name it. Make sure my therapist would be proud for that one, right? Like, name it, acknowledge it, and then acknowledge it as try to determine, is it helpful or is it not helpful? I try to tell my son, in every opportunity that we have and with every person that we meet, with every interaction that we have a choice to be helpful or not to be helpful. And so when you see your mom guilt and it's staring you in the face, ask, are you being helpful or not being helpful? And it's not going to be helpful, so sweep it aside and make sure that it doesn't distract you from being actually present with your kids with the time that you do have. That would be what I would say, but I would love to hear other mommy guilt resolution tips from our panelists, because I'll be taking notes as well. Let me get my pen.
Well, Jessica, I think another way to maybe, echo what you said to me is sometimes with certain situations, I view it as, is it within my control or is it not within my control? If it's something that's within my control and I can do something about it and I can, either reprioritize it or whatnot, then, I take action on it. But if it's something that is out of my control, then, to your point, the guilt is not helpful. It's out of my control. So then, absolutely sweep it aside and move on, right? So that's how I deal with sort of the mom guilt. And I also have a therapist, and she'll be very proud of me for this as well. But I think, making sure your physical and mental health is super important, right? We might always think about our kids or others ahead of ourselves, but if we are not in the best physical and mental health we can be, it's a disservice to everyone around us. So make sure you prioritize that as well.
And role model it for your kids, which is another bonus for role modeling self-care. Karen, any tips to top us off there as a working mom yourself?
I know I love, Dawn,
Or
what
you
you
got
just
it all
said. I
figured
think
out? No mom guilt
no, I
for you,
definitely don't.
right?
I definitely have a lot of mom guilt. I also grew up Catholic, so I just have a lot of guilt in general. But no, I do think it's like reframing it. I think what Dawn just said, if you know, what is your goal with raising children? To raise, you know, strong, successful human adults, and they need to see the behavior from you. They need to see you taking care of yourself. And so, you know, going back to work, it's not just sometimes the best thing for the family financially, but it's also the best thing for your sense of purpose and well-being, and being able to become your full self. So for me, it's a lot about reframing and thinking like I'm trying to still become and work on to become the best person I can, and that's the kind of person I want role modeling it and leading it for my kids. So sometimes you just have to reframe it for yourself. And this is where, like, know what your non-negotiables are. Know the things that you need to, if you want to be home every night before dinner, then don't take a job that requires travel. Or if you need to be the person to take them to school in the morning, then set expectations about early morning meetings. So I'd say just know what your non-negotiables are, and then try to meet there, because I feel like you only feel guilty when your actions and your beliefs are not aligned. So you either need to change your actions, or you have to maybe change some of those beliefs that you might have. And I think that's kind of helped me, but I also still struggle with it all the time, because you know, I want to be the person to take them to every single doctor's appointment. Well, that requires a lot of juggling sometimes. And I want to be the person, you know, I tried to do, like last week, there was a field trip, and I really wanted to go and be the mom on the field trip, but I had a client from Taiwan in the office who is not going to reschedule that meeting. So I had to, you know, I couldn't go, and I wish I could go. So there's definitely situations like that where it comes up to conflict, and I have to just determine what's the priority. And that day, I hate to say it, the client was more the priority than the field trip.
I love that. Another tip I heard, and maybe this resonates with the investors in our community, and certainly at BlackRock, we, you know, our purpose is to help more and more people experience financial well-being. So sometimes we use these types of analogies. One analogy that was offered to me as a working mom, or as a working parent, is that you need to think about your life as a diversified portfolio, and that you only have a fixed number of minutes to invest, and that each bucket that you invest your time in is like a different asset class. And like anything, you want to be diversified, but at any given moment in time, the markets can change, and you want to reallocate your, you know, your investments. And maybe, you know, someone gets sick, and it's time to kind of reallocate some resources into your family. And maybe there's that big client that's flying in from overseas, and maybe you kind of have to reallocate. And so, you know, being in that agile mentality, which I know lots of parents are in already in that mindset on a day-to-day basis, and prioritizing and reprioritizing is the same skill set you can use in returning back. Okay, I'm going to check one more time in the comments to see if there are any more audience questions, and then we will move to a Fairygodboss tradition here with our last few minutes in the panel discussion. Okay, we have a question here. When in the hiring process should you bring up a scheduling issue? For example, taking your child to a standing therapy appointment. I think we've talked about this a little bit. Transparency being key, and setting up those expectations up front. Anything else? Any more tips on that in that respect?
I think if you don't feel comfortable like having that specific ask during the interview process, then get a handle on, I like to say, what does a typical day look like for this role? Like, what time are you expected to be in? When are people usually wrapping up? If people have commitments, like they have to take children to appointments, like when's the best time to schedule those? What if there's no flexibility? What are, you know, team meetings or things that are required everybody to attend? Because I have a lot of meetings, but you can schedule them at different times, or sometimes there's some flexibility, and other meetings there's no flexibility. So I think maybe just asking that day-to-day question, getting a sense of the flow of the day, and then when people are expected to absolutely be present, and when there's more flexibility, I think that can help right away. But it just, once again, it depends on how open and honest you want to be at that early in the juncture. That could be a better topic for maybe when it's getting to that offer stage or a little bit more solidified.
That's a great tip. Yeah. We also live in the age of LinkedIn and social media, and so if you can track down a working parent at that company, I think it's also worth sending a note. They won't all respond, but every now and then you do find those kind of good Samaritans out there that are looking to give folks insight, that insider's perspective. And I think that's another tip that you can all try. Okay, so at Fairy Godboss, we have a tradition of asking our panelists the following. And it is because we've observed that women do not feel comfortable bragging or taking ownership of all the amazing things that they achieve. Not that being a working parent is not one of those things. But we would love to hear from our panelists. Share with us a big accomplishment, personal or professional, that you are most proud of. And then we'll come back to the audience questions.
I guess I'll go first. I have a spot on our iShares Insights Hub, so it's basically the blog for the iShares website. And the content I made last year was the second most read content of any author on the blog. And the first most was from one of our investment strategists who also has some paid promotion behind some of those posts. So unpromoted got the second most views of any author on there. So I feel really proud of that accomplishment, and it's something that, you know, I can help both educate people on fixed income and ETFs, but it's also, I think, amazing to me that I'm writing things that people want to read, and in fact it's being recognized across the industry.
That's amazing, Karen. And I will say it's funny and fun for this question because it does take practice to brag for many women. So I was thinking about what my elevator pitch would be like for this, and it goes something like this. I immigrated from China with my parents as a little girl, not knowing even the ABCs when I arrived. I grew up poor, but through hard work and resilience, skipped 2 grades and was accepted to Cornell Engineering at the age of 15. After graduation, I started my career and eventually pursued and completed my MBA while working full-time. Now, there's been a lot of twists and turns in my career, including the 5-year career hiatus that we're talking about now, but I am proud of the fact that after re-entering the workforce in a new industry, no less to me, I was able to go from associate to VP to director within 8 years. And today, I sit in a role where I absolutely enjoy, I'm good at, and I manage a book of business of over $80 billion. And while there's going to be continued life challenges, like raising a 17-year-old boy as a single mom, now where's the MBA class for that, right? I remain strong, positive, and resilient, and I look forward to many more accomplishments ahead.
I love that. Okay, let's give it up. Big accomplishments for Karen and Don. We celebrate each other here in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Martha wants to know what kinds of roles we're hiring for at BlackRock, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Thank you for the question, Martha. In the meantime, I'd love to hear from both of you. Just briefly, let's chat about BlackRock's culture. Why not? You know, what's your favorite aspect of it, and how does BlackRock aid you in achieving some balance? The question can go to you first, Don.
Well, I mean, as a boomeranger, you know, there's obviously something great about BlackRock that drew me back into BlackRock, and the culture being one of the key aspects. I felt that amongst all the companies I worked at I can make the most impact at BlackRock, and I think that's a you know, partly because of the culture and partly because of like senior management support in different types of programs and initiatives that I want to be involved in and I'm passionate about. So, for example, Jessica is going to talk about the BlackRock Returners program shortly, but this is something that is obviously dear, very near and dear to me as well, and I've been, pushing for it, and so thrilled to see it come alive here. But that's, as I said, there's just a aspect where I can make a lot of impact and be able to, do what I want to do here at BlackRock.
Beautiful. What about you, Karen?
I've been here 13 years, and I think I've stayed because of 2 things. Because I really do believe in the mission that we're on, Jessica, as you mentioned, to bring financial well-being to more and more people, and I can do that very directly with my role in fixed income iShares. but also the people. Like, I just feel like I have such great coworkers. I have great bosses that I've worked for over the years. And I've worked at 2 other companies before working at BlackRock, and I think I'm probably staying here for the long haul. I definitely think that if you're going to spend this many hours away from your family and away from doing things, you should enjoy the people that you're around. And that's really why I think I've stayed for so long, is I think the kinds of people that we hire are intelligent, they're driven, and, they kind of check their egos at the door. So I think that that's really helpful to me compared to some of the other firms in financial services or some of the other cultures that are out there. And then, I love being in our San Francisco office. I think we have slightly different culture than even our New York office, but I really do enjoy the firm, and everybody has been very supportive of me as I've taken 2 different maternity leaves and come back. I was extremely worried, like, oh gosh, my job's going to go away. They're going to give away my responsibilities. And I came back and it was like, oh, thank goodness you're here. Here's all the stuff you missed that we need you to help take care of. So from that perspective, I was very insecure about it when it happened. And then with my second mat leave, I was kind of like, I'm gone. Don't call me. I'll see you guys when I get back. And it was just I was just so much more relaxed the second time around. And then I try to pay it forward and help any women that I know who are going on mat leave or coming back and checking in with them. So I think those kinds of connections really helped me, give me the support, and helped me stay here for so many years as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I would say,
I just echo those points. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Oh, I was going to say, like, BlackRock's family and allies at BlackRock's employee network provides a parental buddy program. So when someone is about to go on maternity leave or have questions, we pair you up with someone more experienced in that area to help provide the guidance. So it's programming like this that is super supportive within BlackRock.
It's so interesting. I've found that the culture to be very similar, and obviously we work in all different areas of the firm, but I think it is a testament to our culture that we can reach out and find those support communities. I have certainly availed myself of the buddy of a new parent to be pairing, and I've availed myself of the free sessions for mental health upon returning back to the office, and some other benefits that we provide to new parents. And, it's just incredibly sticky when you're surrounded with people that are invested in your success and invested in the long-term success, even just looking out from a societal horizon, a societal level. And I think that that's what keeps us all engaged. We're all trying to play the long game here, not only for our own careers, but trying to leave, I think, a better society behind for our children. And maybe if you're going to spend so many hours away from your family, you might as well, hitch your wagon to a company that's maybe trying to build a better future. And so totally agree with all you gals. We are getting ready to wrap up here. So I'm going to ask our panelists one final question, and that is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Karen, you want to take this first? Or you want me to?
Sure.
Who wants it?
No. I mean, my strategy with my career was I avoided things I didn't want to do, and I focused my energy on things I did want to do. And so an example of this would be like financial planning and analysis departments where you're just making reports for people. Like, I didn't want to do that, so I kept gravitating towards markets-focused jobs. And I think it really played out. But I feel like the biggest advice I would give to myself was that first maternity leave that I highlighted. I was just so nervous. I didn't tell my manager till I was like 5.5 months pregnant. And then I, came back as soon as I could because I was really worried about my job going away. Or I think about it now, I probably should have even asked for an extra month, or I probably should have, requested more flexibility because, that's just time you don't get back. And now my daughter's 10 and I just can't, I can't even believe it. She used to just be so little. So that's what I would say is ask for the flexibility if you need it, and you're going to find your way eventually, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. But I think that's probably the biggest advice I would give to my younger self is just, make sure that if you do need time off and when you're coming back, don't be so worried that people won't accept you or people won't be willing to give you opportunities.
And I think the 3 things I would give to my younger self in terms of advice is Stay fluid, flexible, and pivot when you need to. Trust but verify, and always try to find that silver lining in difficult situations, because there always is one.
I love those tips. Mine would be stop worrying so much about the future. I can't believe, candidly, I spent so much time before kids thinking I was crunched for time. LOL. Okay. With that, please join me, everyone, in giving these gals a virtual thank you and virtual applause. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your experience and your fantastic advice. Not our returners, our women, of course, but it's been a delight to hear your personal stories. Thank you for joining us for the Power of Resilience lessons from successful women returners. And for those of you who may be interested in applying to BlackRock for our returnship opportunities, please be sure to scan the code you see here on your screen. So just take out your phone, open up the camera function, and snap this QR code. It will take you to learn more about our program. So this year, we are hiring talent into our ETF business, our compliance function, and our credit team. And of course, if you do not fit the talent profile for these specific 3 roles, that's fine. We would still love to connect with you and inform you of future opportunities. And of course, our hope is to grow this program in the future. And so we hope to add more and more businesses to the returnship community in the future. So we will be sending out a recording of today's event, of course, along with further resources to learn about opportunities at BlackRock, not just opportunities for returnship program, but in general. And you can also check out our page, which you can access through the QR code as mentioned on the screen. Also, I have to encourage everyone, please give your feedback to help us improve future events. You can head to the Typeform tab on the right side of your screen to share your thoughts in a 1-minute survey. And with that, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Karen. And we'll see you next time. Fairygodboss Live. That's all, folks.